I call the September 13th, 2021 school board meeting to order. It is 7 p.m. We are in the conference room C of the Fisher Administrative Building at 12121 West North Avenue. Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Ms. Fraley? Here. Dr. Jessup Anger?
Here.
Mr. Meyer?
Absent.
Ms. Neufeld? Here. Mr. Phillips?
Here.
Mr. Rowland?
Here.
Mr. Doman?
Here. We'll move on to public comment on non-agenda items. Members of the Wauwatosa School Board value the input of students, parents, staff members, and community members. Board's regularly scheduled meetings provide an opportunity for opinions and concerns to be expressed publicly. The board values all comments and will respectfully consider this input decision-making. The board requests that individuals limit their comment on each item to 3 minutes. Following any comment, an individual board member may respond on the issue raised. However, it is not the intent of the public comment portion of the agenda for the board to enter into debate with members of the community. Because non-agenda items are not publicly posted in advance, no action will be taken on public comment regarding non-agenda items. Are there, we'll start in the room. Anyone in the room that wants to make a public comment on non-agenda items, please come forward and state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
From Minneapolis. Deb Feld-Pellick, 7435 West 12th Street. Hello, everybody. I'm just following up on questions regarding the funding, the ESSER 3 funding, and I'm hoping that there can be some kind of report about this. And I know people are super busy, and I ended up calling DPI myself to get information about Wauwatosa and how much funding that is allocated for us. In addition, the extra funds that the Joint Finance Committee decision allowed, there's a check mark next to Wauwatosa saying we're eligible for that. And I believe that application was due August 27th. So I trust that we submitted our application for that extra funding. But I am wondering, because 20% of these funds are required to be spent on targeted groups. And the other piece of information that DPI shared with me is regarding the required consultation with stakeholders. So I'm asking when those listening sessions mandated by DPI will occur as to how the Wauwatosa School District will be using these funds. And I know I had shared back in July the $3-point-something billion that the U.S. Department of Education released for special education. And thank you, Mr. Phillips. I know you got back to me on that. So I learned that that money will be tacked on to our IDE funds. So I'm wondering how much is that and how we're going to be using that, and basically when the required listening sessions will be occurring.
Thank you. Anyone else in person that wants to make a comment on non-agenda items, please come forward.
Hello, my name is Julie Alexander, 7224 West State Street, Unit 1A, Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, 53213. I'm echoing Deb's comments here. I also am wondering when there might be a public session on the new transition program in Wauwatosa, because that also needs to be publicly vetted and have some comments on the community as a whole. And Wauwatosa might be able to be of some help in terms of helping with getting that all together and underway. So I'm wondering about that here. And also am hoping that the city of Wauwatosa has filed for all of the funds that they're eligible through ESSER 3 for people with disabilities, and that we can get a report on that. Thank you very much.
Anyone else in person that would like to speak on non-agenda items? Jamie, is there anyone online?
There are no hands raised.
On our next item tonight, District Service Award recipients. At the district opening day in service, 15 honorees received engraved plaques as recipients of the 2021 Distinguished Service Award. The school board presented the award for exemplary service and dedication to the district. These individuals were nominated by staff members, parents, and students. Nominations were reviewed by school board members, and the following were selected as recipients. And I will add these, they did receive the awards already at the opening day, so they are not with us tonight, but I'll certainly be happy to read their names. Tiffany Chang, orchestra teacher at West. Tracy Eccles, library media specialist at Longfellow. Amanda Frazier, English teacher at West. Lauren Johnson, teacher at WSTEM. David Keach, special ed teacher at West. Taylor McDaniel, social studies teacher at East. Carly Roberts, physics teacher at East. Lauren Razanowski Hayden, orchestra teacher at Longfellow. Kristen Reimer, first grade teacher at Jefferson. Ann Shaw, dance coach at West. Stephanie Spurl, senior kindergarten teacher at McKinley. Mark Supa, principal at Roosevelt. Jeff Valesky, teacher at Velar Phillips. Lenka Winland, third grade teacher at McKinley. And Lisa Winters, IT administration data manager. We give them one more round of applause. I know on behalf of the board, we certainly thank them for all their dedication and their hard work for us. Moving on to the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda which board members would like to remove for separate discussion and action? Ms. Freeman?
Not for removal, but I did just have a question specific to,
I think we should get a motion in a second before we have a question. If there's nothing to be removed.
I move.
Thank you. Second, thank you. Ms. Fraley, your question. Thank you.
sure. My question was just specific to the salary increases. If someone could just explain like what they're for, why the increase, et cetera.
It's a great question. The Human Resources Department did a comparison of area school districts and what they are compensating their school nurses. And when you consider the volume of additional work we've added to school nurses within the last 18 months, being competitive in this market was really important to us. So that's the logic and rationale behind the increase. We have a recommendation to hire a new nurse, and that person's coming from Children's Hospital. But in order to be competitive, we needed to increase and make our salary appealing. And in the process of doing that, it was felt that we needed to candidly reward all of our nurses in this space. So that's the logic behind the salary increases.
And can you talk a little bit about the amount, like the percentage increase, like what's the difference between, percentage wise, what they're being paid before, like what type of an increase?
They hovered in the area of $27 to $29 per hour prior to this increase. Now you will see that on an annual salary basis, it's a $34 an hour for our school nurses, and then for our lead school nurse, that annual salary based on the number of days comes out to $39 per hour.
Okay. Thank you.
Due to the extra leadership and responsibility that Caitlin takes on, I think our community and the board can attest to the fact that she's really stepped up and done a great job for us.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other board comment on consent agenda items?
Mr. President, if I can just comment, when you look at our employee transactions here, I think the only other thing I would just mention to you is to go back to Ida Cruz-Farron's presentation from last meeting. You will note that we've witnessed a number of late resignations, and just being very candid and transparent. A lot of these individuals left because other school districts were able to offer more salary and more money to them in a late time period. And they not only were they able to offer more salary to them, but they were willing to pay their liquidated damages as well. So when when you heard from our Assistant Superintendent for HR for Human Resources last meeting that we need to become more competitive when it comes to professional compensation, it is a priority for my first year that we address this. You must have great teachers in front of students for them to learn. And if we continue to lose our teachers due to salary, because if you talk to a teacher, they will tell you they don't do it simply for the salary, but there's an element of respect and an element of just acknowledgement. And we are falling behind in that space in the metropolitan area. So that I know that some board members asked the question, boy, we've lost. That's a lot of people. And not only is it a lot of people, but it's quality educators that we lost. And it's a great loss for our kids. And so we have to accelerate the conversation around compensation in the district.
Thank you. Any other board comments or questions on the consent agenda? Any community comment on the consent agenda? We'll start in the room. Seeing none. Jamie, is there any online?
There are no hands raised.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Fraley,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger,
Yes.
Ms. Mufeld,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rowland,
Yes.
Mr. Doman.
Yes. Thank you. Move on to superintendent action items. Approval of the Milwaukee tool donation to East High School. Ms. Fraley?
It is recommended that the school board approve the donation of 2 drywall cutout tools, 6 drywall guns, and 6 layout lasers from Milwaukee Tool to East High School, a donor value estimated at $4,686, and I so move.
I second. Second by Dr. Joseph Banger. Any board questions or comments around this item? Any community comment on this item in the room? Online, Jamie, is there anything?
No hands raised.
Anyone please call the roll?
Ms. Fraley,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger,
Yes.
Ms. Mufeld,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rowland,
Yes.
Mr. Doman.
Yes. Move on to approval of the Lincoln Contractor supply donation. Ms. Miko?
Yes, thank you. It is recommended that the school board approve the donation of masonry hand tools from Lincoln Contractor Supply to Wauwatosa East High School. Donor value estimated at $687, and I so move.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any board comment on this item? Any public comment on this? Oh, Ms. Fraley, go ahead.
I wanted to wait until the second one just to say a thank you to both of these organizations. Obviously, these donations are so important for our students and our school district. And so thank you isn't seem like enough, but we really, really appreciate the donations that came in tonight and other donations, that go to individual schools, whether they're musical instruments or anything like that. So just big thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, board members, community members, the reason why we pulled these 2 items off of consent and asked you to formally accept it is because we wanted to ensure that the public was aware of these great donations, and we will ensure that there's a communication that goes back to both organizations to thank them for their generosity.
Thank you. Any other board comment? Ms. Miko?
Thank you. Well, I like them pulled off the consent agenda.
Yes.
I just thought maybe it was new procedure.
All right. Any community comment on this item in the room? Jamie, anyone online?
No hands raised.
Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Ms. Fraley,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger,
Yes.
Ms. Mufeld,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rowland,
Yes.
Mr. Doman.
Yes. Up next, we'll have a superintendent report. We'll hear from EFW Vice President Leila Walters. Provide us an update.
And what I think. Jamie, I can't share the screen.
You have the rights. Just click share screen. There you go, it came up.
Thank you. Sorry about the delay there.
No worries. Good evening. I'm Leila Walters. I am the Vice President for the EFW Education Foundation of Wauwatosa, and we appreciate the opportunity to give you an update. I'm going to start with an overview of our purpose. I'm going to try anyway. Let's see. As I play with the technology here, the EFW exists to support our teachers and our our educators in promoting excellence, innovation, and opportunities in their schools by raising and awarding money for educational initiatives, which prepare students for success by enhancing and enriching their learning experience. So we're really focused on looking for ways to bring new ideas and opportunities into the classroom to support the overall educational experience. The Education Foundation of Wauwatosa has been around for 30 years. And in those 30 years, we have been able to award over $1 million in grants, including last year, we gave a $30,000 grant to support the purchase of Chromebook technology during the move to hybrid at the beginning of the year. So we're really proud of what we've been able to accomplish. It's over 400 grants in those 30 years for that $1 million in total grants funded. Here we have an overview of where the grants have gone, just so you can see how we have been able to benefit all of the schools of the district. Sometimes we have awards or grants that are submitted and that we award that are able to support multiple schools, both sides of the district, all of the elementary schools, both of the high schools. They're written in ways that really expand the impact on all of the students. And that's one of the things we look for in our grant review process, is how many overall students will the grant impact. And then we also look at like how sustainable is the impact. So we're really looking for grants that can have multi-year impacts for the students in those schools. So we're really proud of the overall impact we've been able to have across the entire district through our grant process. Last year was our 30th year, and so we were able to put together a grant award that was our largest grant in the history of the EFW. We started with a $30,000 grant proposal, given it was our 30th year. But because of our success in funding overall, we were able to actually award a $50,000 grant for the 3D virtual anatomy table that gives students the ability to dissect complex structures using their fingertips. I actually have a student who is able to use this in their classroom this year, and it's super exciting to hear the things that they're able to do already in the first couple of days of school with this incredible piece of educational material that we were able to bring to the district. So really super excited and proud of the work that we could do to help improve the education experience. Our two primary events for raising funds are our Black and White Gala, which happens in February of every year. This coming year, it will be at the Renaissance, so at a new location, and we're really excited. We're hoping to be back in person for this event. So we're hoping to see many folks out there to help support our purpose and the exciting things that we're doing. We've already started the grant proposal process for this year, so letting the teachers and other educators in the district know about our grant process. And so we're trying to generate the excitement to support those events so that we can have the resources again to give out the grants and support the great ideas that are brought forward. Our second event has been a rush, which we've done for many years and just generates a lot of excitement throughout the district. I'm having both a 5K for competitive runners and then a 1 mile fun run and walk that brings out a lot of families in the community to participate. So those are the two places that you can see us and give us your support and bring other ideas forward to us for continuing to support education. And then of course we do have our website where we would be always promoting the things that we're doing. We're due grant visits in the classroom, which will be coming up shortly to recognize our teachers and to reward them publicly in front of their students for the great work they're doing. And we'll put images of that and celebration of that on our website as well, just to keep continuing to promote the impact that we're having in the schools. Those are my prepared comments. Any questions for me?
Well, let me just first say thank you for coming here tonight. We appreciate it. I know it's been a difficult couple of years, so we really appreciate you staying engaged with the district and with our community. EFW is certainly a big part of it. So thank you for all that you do.
You're welcome.
Any board questions or comments, Ms. Freeman?
I got a really tactical one. Do you know the date for the Black and White Gala yet?
It is the 5th,
Okay,
February 5th. Yes, so mark your calendars.
Yeah, I just know if I wait to go to the website, I'll forget.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other board comments or questions?
I'd say we appreciate your support and any ideas you have for how we can continue to do so. We're really interested to hear it.
Absolutely. No further comments? Well, let me just say again, thank you for coming forward and thank you for continuing to support our schools. It's great to see the new things we bring forward every year. So
Thank you.
it's been very timely and very important. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any community comment on this item, on the superintendent report in the room? Online, Jamie?
No hands raised.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to Human Resources Report. Director of Human Resources, Jenny Fotch, will give us a report.
As Jenny makes her way to the microphone, I would just want to thank her for her outstanding work. She's our Director of Human Resources. I think she also will give you an update on information we just found out today regarding our staff members at Val Phillips and how that impacts with the county's mandate of vaccination. It's a real interesting turn of events that we'll have to navigate. But Jenny, thank you for your leadership and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Means. It's nice to be here tonight to share some good news about our vaccination rate. But before I do that, I want to tell you just a little bit about where we've been in our journey to provide vaccination and encourage it amongst our staff. It is not currently mandated that any staff member receive the COVID-19 vaccine. However, in early January, we were able to partner with the Wauwatosa Health Department for those eligible at the time. And that was particularly people doing medical services, our nurses, speech paths, a lot of student services personnel were eligible early on, and the health department was wonderful in letting us know when those folks could get in. So we've had a steady stream since January of employees seeking vaccination. We were able to partner with the health department to provide vaccination for all our staff. We set aside 2 dates for the 2 doses because at the time only Pfizer and Moderna were available. And that was March 12th and April 9th. However, our partners at Freightert were also able to offer vaccines starting in early March to all staff. So in the month of March, that was probably our busiest time with staff getting vaccinated, which was really great to see. We did send our new staff message about vaccination and provided links to access vaccination if they hadn't already, and then to collect their information if they were already vaccinated. We used the provisions of emergency paid sick leave, which were extended under the American Rescue Plan Act, to extend those benefits to staff. And from April 1st to June 30th, that did include time off to not only receive the vaccination, but also if there were any side effects. from having received the vaccinations themselves. Employees were given paid time off within that span of time. And then we've been requesting vaccination records since about February. We have asked that staff report their first or second dose. That's all we ask for at the time, is just the self-report. So it's completely voluntary. We haven't mandated. We've strongly encouraged staff to share so we can get an accurate count. So when you hear me say unvaccinated staff later in my report, it's probably also unreported staff, because there very well may be a staff member or two or several that just haven't submitted their information, because we haven't yet gone down the road of asking one by one each employee their status. So the great news is that when I compiled this data, we were at 83% vaccination rate in our staff. I'm happy to report that's gone up 1% today to 84. So slowly, steadily, we're getting towards that goal of everyone being vaccinated. It's really, really encouraging to see this completely voluntary participation amongst our staff members. I'm going to also share by employee group, because I thought it might be interesting to see that comparison. But before I go into that, I just wanted to give you a quick look at who makes up our different employee groups. You have your administrative assistants, administrators, which are building and district combined, educational assistants, that's our special education assistants, classroom aides, health room aides, Title I staff. Buildings and grounds would include maintenance, the building level custodians, our operations relief workers. They move all about the district doing various tasks. Some food service personnel, as well as in that building and grounds group. Our teachers would include all classroom-based teachers, but that does include student services. So your counselors, social workers, psychologists, all student services staff and special education teachers are in that group as well. Anyone on the teacher contract. And then finally, we have a group we call Select, and that encompasses a lot of different staff members, our technology staff. There's other food service in that category, some of our human resources staff, athletic directors, the nurses, and the data analytics staff are all part of that group. So just to give you a little split on how that breaks down. Obviously, our teacher group is our largest employee group. So as you can see, we have a pretty positive turnout in most of our groups. And I know they're the buildings and grounds group, more unreported than vaccinated. That is also only 4% of our workforce, just for some context there, that population of employee represents about 4% of our entire workforce. By comparison, we are doing really, really well compared with the state of Wisconsin, was at 52%. The county of Milwaukee and the city of Wauwatosa, our average is well above any of those data points, which is really encouraging. Now, moving forward, our ultimate goal is 100% employee vaccination. We do recognize that some employees may have a religious exemption or are medically unable to receive the vaccination, but we do encourage the vaccination if possible. We are exploring with our legal counsel and our benefits consultants the possibility of using a wellness surcharge on insurance premium to encourage people to get vaccinated if they have not already. We think this would promote some positive wellness behaviors and would help sustain our self-funded plan. A financial incentive for vaccination just isn't feasible and sustainable at this point. However, when we talk about wellness surcharges, that would involve some help from the board in working some policy language, because to include a wellness surcharge, be it for vaccination or biometric screening or whatever the Wellness Act might be, we do need to amend our policy in the future if we're going to consider that. And then the latest update relative to staff at Velar Phillips. As you all know, Milwaukee County has mandated vaccination for its employees, and that includes its contractors. So I'll be working with the staff at Velar Phillips to go over how that's going to impact them. But essentially, Milwaukee County has told us our staff that works there needs to be vaccinated. So I'll continue to work with the administrators at the county grounds to figure out how that impacts and what sort of documentation. The county is going to require more documentation than we have, which we'll handle through human resources. Any questions at this point?
And I guess the only other thing I would just add, Jenny, if you don't mind, is
Sure.
I know President Biden last week issued some mandates that he's looking to implement soon with vaccination. Obviously, we would be an employer with over 100 employees. We do receive federal funding. So it appears as if his suggestion of having some type of OSHA requirement would apply to the school district. But legally, we have been advised to allow the process to play out to see if there will be any legal challenges to his mandates. And that's why we wanted to share with you this evening. We have a strategy regardless of the president's mandate of having staff vaccinated. And as Jenny stated, some type of wellness behavior or wellness surcharge goes well beyond the issue of the day, which is vaccination. I think there's other advantages when you consider the fact that we are a self-funded insurance plan. So more to come as we continue to unpack the legal and benefit ramifications of that potential policy language change to bring forward to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Foch. One question I have quickly, when you talk about the staff, the county staff, what numbers are we looking there? Do we have a breakdown of vaccinated, unvaccinated, or just interested how that might?
I haven't broken it down by building.
No problem. Just happened today. That's no problem.
But I can tell you there's about 25 staff at Bell Phillips. That I can tell you. I don't know how many of them are vaccinated.
That's
I think it'll be a very small amount that we have any issue with, but it might just be that they've not reported.
Absolutely.
So.
Sure. I appreciate that. Any board comments or questions? Ms. McFell.
Thank you. Thank you. This is helpful. What is a wellness surcharge? What does that look like?
So a wellness surcharge would be essentially a portion of the premium paid by the employee. So in this case, relative to COVID-19, if an employee on our insurance plan were unvaccinated, they would have to pay a portion of the premium each month for health insurance.
Any other board comments or questions?
You answered all my questions that I emailed in, so thank you.
Jenny, maybe just to explore one step further, can you speak to the legal challenges of providing a financial incentive for employees and what the law has stated about that? Because I think it gives us a perspective as to why we're pursuing a surcharge versus something else.
Sure. I think any financial incentive that we must provide, we have to have a way for all employees to access that incentive, which makes it really challenging, especially when it's kind of you're either receiving a vaccine or not receiving a vaccine. There's no real middle ground there relative to that. And I think, extra taxable wages might, negatively impact someone with it relative to their tax bracket, and the plans that they're making. Additionally, it's just not a sustainable method. We also want to encourage positive wellness behaviors amongst our staff. So I think that this type of surcharge makes more sense. And given some of the other restrictions relative to incentives and IRS rules and regulations, this makes more sense. And I think is a little bit more clear cut than an incentive program and figuring out who's how employees could access it if they don't have. If they don't have, I'm trying to think of the way to say this, but I guess it's harder to devise that program and stay within the bounds of the law. Then we can very easily analyze a wellness surcharge and how that might apply. If that makes sense.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question, but I don't know if it's for discussion tonight. Not all of our employees have benefits.
Correct.
So how does that work if we want to put a surcharge and they don't have any benefits? I mean, what?
They would incur no extra financial penalties or surcharge. I mean, if they don't take our benefits, there would be no surcharge.
But then we don't, there's no way for them. Why would they, if they don't have the vaccine now, then why would they wouldn't get it?
No, that wouldn't impact them.
Yeah.
That would not. You're right.
You're right.
The surcharge for employees without insurance does not change their behavior.
Exactly.
Yes.
So.
And just so we're clear, this is something we're exploring, not something we're.
Yeah, nothing has been set in stone relative to this.
And Jenny, do you have a sense of how many employees would fall into the category of being unvaccinated and potentially not having benefits as well?
I don't have a firm number, but I mean, obviously the vast majority of our full-time employees take our benefits.
We can gather that
crunch
data.
those numbers for sure. I just don't have a sense in the moment.
If we get to the point where we're considering it, I think Ms. Meefeld raises a good point.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't know about all of you, but from my seat, I'm quite concerned because we need our great staff people. And this is a difficult question for the 17% of our population if these mandates continue. So, what does that mean for us? Can we not employ our great staff? I'm concerned. So, I know we're not at that juncture at this moment, but I'd like to understand where we are at, and I want to keep our great people. So.
Yeah, we have not mandated vaccination. That's not been an item for discussion. And you're right, the wellness surcharge would only apply to those staff taking benefits.
I think what you're pointing out is that this is a challenging conversation because a month ago or so, there were community members and others who said, so what are you doing to ensure 100% of your staff is vaccinated? And so I think what we've wanted to bring to you tonight is that we've done our due diligence. We have a sense of how many of our staff members are vaccinated and who are not vaccinated. And if our goal is 100%, if that's a true goal, and I think that's a goal that we have, then there are few strategies we have in our toolkit to actually make that a reality. Are any of those strategies ideal or something that we want to do? No. But if our goal is to ensure that the adults who are working with young people or who are close to them from a social distance standpoint are vaccinated, then we have limited options to deploy. So I think what we wanted to bring this evening is just to state we have a sense, because if you remember last meeting, the question was put forth, so what percentage of your staff is vaccinated? We didn't know. Now we have a better sense. So that was one objective of this report. The second was that we wanted to at least express to the board and the community that we're exploring a strategy. We're not sure if it's the best strategy, but it's not reasonable to say that we're not going to do anything. And it's not reasonable to say that we're going to do something and not think about the consequences either. So we just wanted to bring all the options to the table.
But but we have to have people for our young people. So if for some reason we lose staff, we have to have a way to replace the staff in a big hurry if there's, depending on the timeline and the situation for these mandates.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot to be played out yet, for sure.
So I just want to bring that up.
Any other board?
Are you suggesting that staff would leave if there was a surcharge? Is that your concern?
No, I'm worried if we can't employ people because they won't be vaccinated, if we're mandated that way. That's why I'm concerned.
I see. I thank you. I want to get some clarification on that.
Because if 17% of our people can't work for us, what are we going to do for the young people?
And I think, so Sharon, you're raising a really good point, and it's actually, we're going through a drill of that, if you will, right now with the county staff. So we've had a conversation today, and we have a staff of about 25 at Val, our Phillips. We know that percentage-wise, there's about 4 to 5 staff members who are unvaccinated right now. And so Jenny and I had the conversation this afternoon of, so what would we do with these staff members if by October 11th, I think is the deadline for the county, if we find that those 4 or 5 staff members are unvaccinated still, what do we do for those children in that program? It is it's a challenge. We want to continue to find strategies to encourage staff to get vaccinated. We also want to let the board and the community to know that we're not quite sure what the president's mandates mean, but if you take it literally and understand what he said by the true letter of the law, we need to do something to get those, the 16% now of our staff members who are not vaccinated, so we're not understaffed. So we share your concern, and we're working hard to try to find some strategies to address it.
Any other board comments or questions concerning this report? Any community comment on the Human Resources report concerning vaccinated staff? In the room first. Please state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
John from 772 North 116th Street. I'll keep this real brief. My understanding here is vaccination is not the only option. The other option is to get tested weekly for COVID. So we don't have to mandate that our staff actually get the vaccine. I myself am vaccinated, it's my choice. There are people who may choose not to, but we don't want to force the issue, and I don't think the idea of a penalty of some sort, which is kind of what we're discussing with the surcharge for the healthcare, is a penalty on these people because they made a choice. Otherwise, forcing the issue on them, I don't think that's the right way either way. You have a secondary option that you should be looking at as far as that's concerned. We can't lose good teachers. We were talking about trying to retain teachers a few minutes ago, and to push an issue on them, we may lose them. That's not a good option.
Any other public comment from the folks in the room? Jamie, anyone online?
There are no hands raised.
Thank you. We appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
We'll move on to teaching and learning reports. We're going to have a report from Dr. Marble, Director of Secondary Education on Avid.
As Dr. Marble was working on the technology, just want to point out to the community board members that since we posted the materials on Friday, there have been questions that have been submitted. We answered those questions with an FAQ that has been posted on board docs. We also made some adjustments to the presentation that you'll see this evening. Dr. Marble, thank you for your leadership in this area.
Thank you, Dr. Means, and good evening, school board members. Thank you for the opportunity to connect with you tonight about our work around Avid implementation. This evening, I'm joined by a number of our high school teachers and our high school administrators. So they will be sharing some of their work with you. But I'll start off very briefly with a macro level overview of our work with Avid. So again, to reground ourselves, Avid is an acronym that stands for Advancement via Individual Determination. Avid is a framework that is designed to help all students develop the skills that we desire for them as outlined by our vision of a graduate, so that they may be successful in college, career, and our global society. It is part professional development for educators, part specialized programming for students in the Avid Elective class, and part-time system-wide change platform for an entire school. Avid has two distinct elements of programming specifically at the secondary level, the Avid Elective and Avid School-wide. I'll speak first about the Avid Elective. The elective prepares students that take the course for college readiness and success, and it is scheduled during the regular school day as a year-long course. The elective course is intended to provide students that are traditionally underrepresented in post-secondary education and those whose needs might not be fully met within a traditional high school structure. As such, in the course, students receive instruction utilizing a rigorous college preparatory curriculum provided by Avid Center. Students engage in motivational activities and work to develop academic success skills. Students also participate in activities that incorporate strategies focused on writing, inquiry, collaboration, organization, and reading to support their academic growth. Currently, students engage in study groups twice a week. However, the vision as prescribed by Avid Center is to have tutors facilitate study groups. This year, we are working with higher education institutes in our area to begin a partnership of college-age tutors to serve as real-time mentors and role models. In the work of the elective course, students will also refine short and long-term goals, and as a result, begin to understand the value of taking charge of their actions. Students will take an active role in their learning, understand the roles of all members in assignments and collaborative lessons. They will expand their knowledge based on basis of note-taking in relation to studying and test preparation. Students will be exposed to different field trips, guest speakers, and research to increase their knowledge of college and career options. Avid School-wide, on the other hand, is an extension of the Avid Elective, providing all students with the opportunity to engage in the Avid philosophy employed in the Avid Elective. The Avid School-wide approach is also what is employed at the elementary level. Secondary Avid School-wide and Avid Elementary focuses on 4 specific areas: instruction, systems, leadership, and culture. With instruction, it is the intent for staff to utilize Avid strategies, other best instructional practices, and 21st century tools to ensure college readiness for every student in the school. The goal is to enhance everyday instruction for all students and improve academic performance for every student. To do this, systems need to be in place that support local school governance, data collection and analysis, professional learning, and student and parent outreach to ensure college readiness for all students. To improve academic performance, make sure that academic performance is enhanced for all students. Furthermore, school leadership sets the vision and tone to promote college readiness and high expectations for every student in the school. Leadership holds themselves and others accountable for improved student performance and demonstrate college and career readiness. Finally, the school's culture or its belief and behaviors are reflected and demonstrated in an increase in the number of students meeting college career readiness. In short, the culture of expectation is increased as a result of implementing Avid School-wide with fidelity. For a school to truly be functioning as outlined takes years of diligent work beyond the initial year of implementation. It starts out with a small group of teachers that learn, implement, reflect, and refine their practice, and then teach their colleagues. This flow chart outlines the way in which we will be evaluating appropriateness of the Avid framework in our individual schools moving forward. As you can see here, the building leader would be the one to initiate the conversation and outline for district administration why the Avid framework would or would not be a viable solution to the problem or problems of practice that the individual school is working to address. At present, non-administrative staff members at 6 of our schools have received formal training from Avid Center, thus marking initial Avid implementation. This slide provides a snapshot of where these 6 schools currently are in their implementation journey. As outlined in the executive summary, our 2 high schools have been engaged with Avid the longest and have more to report out at this time. And with that, I will turn it over to Mrs. Grice and Mr. Hughes and their respective school teams to share more about what they are doing at their individual schools. So, Mrs. Grice.
Good evening to the board and Dr. Means and the community. And so we are very pleased to be here to speak about our work with Avid. There's a lot that we could say because we've been working really hard over the summer to really work on our Avid implementation. And so we're going to try to streamline this as best as we can with some of the great work that's taken place so far. We're going to speak more specifically about our Avid school-wide implementation for the school year for 21-22. And so as Dr. Marble mentioned, our focus this year is to support our teachers with a framework to build capacity around universal instruction, or also known as Tier 1 instruction. Basically just meaning instruction for all students. So improving learning and instruction in all classrooms. And so we use the Avid Framework to be able to do that. There are 4 domains of the Avid Framework. The one that we are focusing on very intently this year. Oh, sorry, thank you. First of all, let me apologize. I apologize. Let me introduce my team. I have Associate Principal Leah Claiborne here, and I have our site team coordinator, our department chair for physical education, Krista Botsford. So my apologies. This is my team here with me. We're also going to speak in a bit. So we use the Avid Framework, and the area that we are focusing on very specifically is instruction. And so what we're able to do with this framework is we're able to provide professional learning to engage staff regularly in instructional practices, and Avid provides that framework for us. And so this year, we really wanted to make sure that every teacher was focusing on the how, and that's the instructional part. And we wanted to be very intentional about the lesson planning behind that. So we are at West focusing on a very school-wide model, if you will. And so we have a professional learning essential question for our entire staff. And that essential question is, how can Avid instructional strategies be the foundation for universal/Tier 1 instruction in all classrooms? And so, as Dr. Marble mentioned, there are 2 types of Avid, if you will, in terms of there's a school-wide Avid system and there's an Avid elective. We are focusing on both, but our intentional strategy for every teacher in our building is that school-wide focus, which we'll talk about a little bit more. And so with that, we wanted to make sure, I just want to give you a really quick idea of where this comes from. And so we have to identify our problem of practice, which basically is that intentional area of instruction that we're going to focus on for the year. And so to give you a little bit of an idea, we use what's called the Coaching and Certification Instrument, and it's a self-assessment tool that Avid has. And it allows us to take a look at what we've done in school. And we self-assess, though, just to be clear, but allows us to take a look at what we're doing already in school, whether that's instructional practices, engagement, student learning. And so we take that as part of our data to be able to determine what we want to work on for the following school year, in addition to the qualitative data of instructional walkthroughs, classroom observations, and some student feedback. And so with that, what we found from that was we needed to really focus on instructional practices. When you walked in classrooms, from classroom to classroom, the instruction may look different. And we want to make sure that if you walk in whomever's classroom, you see some level of consistency. And so we were able to identify our problem of practices, instructional strategies in the classroom resulting in decreased levels of student engagement. And so what we realized is if we have a consistent definition of effective instruction and improve our school-wide instructional practices, we can see a direct correlation to increase of student engagement, leading to increased student achievement. And so our goals, through our own professional learning of Avid, we know that instruction is the cornerstone of all of this. And so our goals, our teachers will engage students in structured discourse strategies in order to connect more deeply with the content and engage with their peers. And I like to say that those are Avid strategies. Those come directly from the coaching and certification instrument that I mentioned before. And so we'll be picking selective strategies and monitoring those quarterly. And then goal 2, all teachers will incorporate an essential question, learning targets, and success criteria in their lesson plans for consistent instructional practices school-wide. I'm gonna let my team talk a little bit more about that, but what I wanna say, and I just wanna celebrate the staff at West, back August 25th, we had professional learning for our staff. And we went back to the Avid basics and we talked about what Avid is, how we will implement it, and we provided professional learning for the instructional practices around essential question, which might I add is an Avid framework or an Avid strategy. But then the essential question, learning targets, and success criteria. We gave that professional learning. We gave time for teachers to actually go back with their departments and write lessons with those components so that they can then have some discourse about what worked, what didn't work, and then implement that as well. And so through that, we were able to do the following things, which I'm really happy about: create a school-wide definition of effective instruction, provide the professional learning that promotes collaboration among staff, which is really important because you have a PE teacher working with a math teacher and sharing strategies. And so really able to go deeper into those cross-content areas. And then really important, we were able to really talk more about that system-wide approach to addressing instruction. That allows us to look more at our instructional and practices for inequities, right? If we're all talking about instruction across the board, we can really start to see what instructional practices are not working and those that are inequitable. And then lastly, it allows us to progress monitor each goal via our school improvement plan. So although these are our Avid site goals, these are also goals that are and will be incorporated into our school improvement plan so that we can monitor those quarterly or semester, just depending on how we look at those. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our associate principal, Leah Claiborne, who has actually worked on Avid much longer than I have.
Hello.
Hello.
It was just a quick mic check. I'm going to talk a little bit about the interplay between the Avid site team and the whole staff at Tosa West. We started meeting this year over the summer in the site team to try to both relaunch. Dr. Marble used the word reground, which is really great, just to get us back into what Avid is, what it means, and talk a little bit about some of the behaviors that teachers would practice to get students college and career ready. And just to kind of like rear us up, get us excited for the year, and meet around that essential question of how might Avid be the foundation of universal or tier 1 instruction at West and in the classrooms. And that was great, both to kind of get us together, know that we were not going to answer that question. That is something we're going to be working toward this year, but also to be able to model that for our staff. And so when we started our work on August 25th with our staff kind of kicking it off, Avid for the whole school, we were able to start strong because that was our goal, is to have strong start, strong finish with our students. But we also wanted them to know, like, this is our goal together. This essential question is what we're going to be working on, and this is our model for you. And so we wanted to connect the instructional work of the building to the Avid work. Learning intentions and success criteria is something that is familiar to the building. It's something we had been working on, but connecting that to an essential question, something that students can engage in and latch onto, was kind of the new work and part of the Avid work. And so that's what we engaged in on August 25th. And so that strong start, strong finish is kind of like our first practice. And that was just it's kind of a hybrid of some of the things we've done at West, the learning targets and success criteria, and Avid work around essential questions. So getting back to that site team, the work of the site team is to bring strategies, bring feedback from students, bring work from students to the staff. And so we're working, our first example is that strong start, strong finish, but we're going to also be working, as Ms. Gray said, on discourse and collaboration throughout the year. And so the idea being that the site team is going to use some of those practices in their classrooms. We're going to meet first with the site team, be able to kind of grapple with it, talk about it, get feedback, use student work examples and take a look at it, and then roll it out through our early release Wednesdays. And so if it's something that we want all staff to be involved in, that would be a connected learning day. We have PLCs, which would be an opportunity for department work. And then we also have collaborative days, which would be really intentional, maybe small groupings if we wanted to do something really particular with some of our Avid strategies. And so again, the idea being that our Avid team would be able to kind of test these things out, but then when they meet monthly, they're able to kind of wrap their heads around it together and make sure they are getting the support from their own team before they would bring any strategies out to the larger staff. And then just kind of ensuring that there's a support for everybody. The Avid site team is going to get support from us, the admin team, and the site team from each other. And then the greater staff will have opportunities for surveys quarterly. And so we will both get support needs and also monitor some progress. What strategies are you using and how is that going? And that'll be done through quarterly survey. And then we also just have the CCI as our foundation work, just helping us with more strategies on discourse and collaborative work to kind of support us as we go on this journey. And now we have Crystal Botsford.
Hello, I am Krista Botsford. I teach physical education at West. I'm the department chair, and I also serve 2 roles on the Avid, relating to Avid. I am the site coordinator, and I also teach the Avid 9 elective class. This will be my 3rd year teaching the Avid 9 elective, and I'm super excited because I'm hoping it's a full year of meeting with my students. So I'm very excited about that. The impact of my role is very unique because I get to work with the Avid site team together in that leadership role. And then I get to support implementation to our staff as well. And then I get to use the strategies in my Avid 9 elective class to really dig down deep and use those strategies and then share it out with my site team. And then obviously span it out a little bit to our staff and students. Our entire site team meets once a month, and we discuss and progress monitor strategies that we're trying in the classroom. In addition, I meet with 2 other teachers, Avid 9, Avid 10, who is Sarah Minsky, and Avid 11, who is Heidi Hagwood. We meet once a month to go over some of the strategies we're working on to make sure we're consistent in our courses across each year. And then we want to be able to impact all of our students in all of the classes throughout Wauwatosa West in all the curriculum areas. So some of those strategies that we use for best teaching practices are like executive functioning skill planning activities, academic behaviors that can be incorporated into any classroom. So we really dive into those conversations in those meetings. We've seen firsthand how these strategies improve teachers' instructional practices, and that directly helps with student engagement and the success for all the students here at West.
Thank you, Ms. Botts and Ms. Claiborne. And so just to continue the conversation of what Ms. Botsford mentioned, I just want to share a little bit of Avid in action. And so this first picture here, this peer tutorials, this is in the Avid elective specifically. And so part of the Avid framework allows for the peer tutorials where students can then take their own leadership of the learning and then peer another tutor. And so that's one piece of it. I wanted to be able to capture that. But that middle section there with the executive functioning skills really is where a lot of the work lies in terms of Avid. If you do a little bit more digging into Avid, it talks about that kind of middle of the road student. And so what we like to think of is the student who may be having difficulty with chemistry, or the student who will be a chemist and just needs more executive functioning skills. It really could go either way. And so we talk about what executive functioning, what organizational skills might those students need, but not just students who are enrolled in Avid, but students school-wide. So that's what that represents. And then that last one, I really wanted to be able to show our community that although we have Avid electives, which Ms. Bosford spoke about, but it also crosses into other areas, which is the intent is that students who are enrolled in Avid at this time, that they can begin taking Algebra 2, they can begin taking AP courses because they have those executive functioning skills. And so if you look at that last picture there, that's focused note-taking in Algebra 2. And I know that East High School is going to talk a little bit more about focused note-taking, but it's right there in that very same curriculum, and it's allowing students to access that learning at a higher level, which is what we want for all of our students. And then I'm going to go from right to left because that essential question that Ms. Claiborne spoke about, essential questions are really key in learning because it really asks students to grapple with the learning, but over a long period of time, and it doesn't have an open-ended question. And so that is more essential questions in math. And really, sometimes people may think that there may not be an essential question in math, but it really sometimes can be, and allow students to grapple with that idea, whatever that learning target is over a long period of time. And then the structured discourse that we're going to work on, one of our teachers is already implementing. That's Ms. Minsky there. She teaches the elective 10. And so she was already on day 4 engaging students in the structured discourse that we speak of. The piece that I really want to focus on in this particular photo is that math emphasis improvement work. Not to go too deep, but we've been working on our math emphasis programming at West High School. And so what we're going to do this year is, or we've already begun the work, is we are going to reframe what math emphasis look like, which is a math support class, but we're going to reframe it with Avid strategies, and we've already done that. And so what that looks like is using the focused note-taking, using the self-assessments for students so that they can self-assess their work throughout the week, and then we can have better data on how students are doing in a math support class and how it directly ties to, for instance, if they're in math emphasis algebra, algebra, how it directly ties to the work that they're doing in algebra. And so that is huge. If you look at that, in that box, it says Avid Instructional Strategies. What might we use to improve our support work and then directly correlate that data? So with that, that is the end of our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having East High School here. My team tonight, Betsy McGinnity, Associate Principal. Kelly Roberts is our site team coordinator as well as elective, ninth grade elective. Ricky Tierney is a social studies teacher and also doing 10th grade elective for the second year. Before I even talk about why Avid for East High School, I hope that, like, I'm back there listening to West High School talk about all the things they're doing. And I just wanted to raise my hand and say, we're doing that too. We're doing that too. To feel the alignment in what they're talking about and what we have in our plan, like, makes me feel really good about the work we're doing at secondary level. So I really want to thank them for filling in so many of the things that I wanted to raise my hand to talk about. It is great to be aligned. When I think about Avid at East High School, a lot of the things that Nicole has mentioned, Dr. Marble has mentioned, and Ebony has mentioned come into play. But for me, I believe that Avid at East is going to help us to achieve at the levels we believe all our kids are capable of. The focus on high quality tier 1 instruction will be supported through Avid, The classroom level instruction for all is going to be driven by our work in Avid. We'll talk a little bit later about some of the things we're doing to grow strategies within students because Avid itself will also support our staff development for all teachers and in all content areas. I think it's really rare that we have something like Avid that all teachers in content areas can say, I can find something that's applicable that's going to help me grow, whether it's strategies, methodologies, or pedagogy. Staff is excited when we came back this year to dig back into Avid. They're excited about the opportunity to learn from each other, to get more staff development around instructional strategies that they may already be using but can refine or may be new to them and will really solve a classroom challenge that they might be having. For students, I think Avid is really going to provide the equitable educational opportunities that we want them all to experience. The goal, as mentioned by Dr. Marble, is all of our students achieving the competencies and vision of a graduate. I really believe that Avid is going to help us achieve that. Again, it perfectly aligns with the goals that we have in our equity plan, as well as our district goals. So we've done a lot of work to make sure that we are aligning that and making sure that it's clearly connected so that our work is not scattered around, but it is really focused. So as West High School mentioned and talked already, we bantered around a lot about our identified problem of practice. Where can we get the most from our Avid work? And when we talk about what that broken door is, what we can fix right away to apply to the most people is inconsistent use of effective instructional strategies to promote student engagement. We talked about engaged students being effective within the classroom and learning at high levels. We believe that we know we have challenges in our achievement gap. We have students that say they're not connected to school. We have parents that say children are not connected to school. And we've been in classrooms where we believe that with some small tweaks in instruction, we can engage more students. So that's what we have identified as our problem of practice. To address those goals, to address that problem of practice, we have two goals in East High School. One is 100% of teachers will implement 2 lessons using all 5 steps of focused note-taking. As a former history teacher, I gave a lot of notes, but I never taught kids how to go back and use them, how to develop an understanding, how to write summaries. So we've already started this work in some of our professional development this year. Second, by the end of the school year, all teachers will learn and implement 2 new instructional strategies within their classrooms around concepts of writing and inquiry, collaboration, organization, and reading, which Ms. McGinnity will talk a little bit about how we're going to provide that for staff.
Thanks. So this year, as part of our connected professional learning early release Wednesdays, we are utilizing our Avid site team. They are going to conduct 3 cycles throughout the year. Each cycle will contain 3 sessions. The first session of the cycle, our Avid site team members will be facilitating sessions on different instructional strategies. During those sessions, all of our staff will participate and choose the one that they would like to add to their classroom. During that time, staff will be given time to learn about the strategy and then given time to really think through how am I going to implement this within my classroom, within my lessons. The second session in our cycle is going to involve our equity work. So we have been working with an equity trainer for the last 3 years at East High School. So she'll be part of that cycle as well to really help us think about those adult behaviors that Ms. Claybor referred to in their presentation. How are we as adults implementing these strategies from an equity lens to help all of our learners in our classrooms? And then the last session within the cycle is going to be having our staff go back with their initial group from that first session to really think through how did it go, giving staff time to collaborate and reflect on how did I implement that strategy, how did it go within my classroom, what can I do differently, again, so that we are addressing the needs of all of our learners. This is also going to be tied to staff's evaluation. So for their personal professional goal, this has been a goal that we've suggested that staff utilize so that we're all working towards that common goal as a team. Now, Kelly Roberts is going to talk about our Avid Elective students and how they help us school-wide.
Okay. I get the fun part. I'm Kelly Roberts, and this is my 3rd year teaching Avid and my 20th year at Wauwatosa East. So the Avid Elective, as we've talked about, focuses on those WICR skills, the writing, the inquiry, collaboration, organization, and reading. We also work on closing the opportunity gap through exploration of post-secondary options. For instance, last year we did a virtual college fair. This year we're hoping to do some in-person ones. We're always focusing on the future, independence, and having options, post-secondary options. Some examples, Avid students act as ambassadors to model and promote what they learned in the elective. Let me move this closer. There we go. They use a specific organizational system, or the big binders. And we've been really excited because our students have been successfully using this organizational system. And I also work in the ARC, where we house tons of supplies. And we have had students and teachers come down to the ARC and say, like, give me the supplies and help me build my own binder the Avid way. So it's moving out amongst other students. Our first year with Avid, our 9th grade Avid students taught a focus note-taking lesson to all of their peers during advisory. So every 9th grade student in that first year received instruction in the focus note-taking process from their peers, from the Avid students. Last year, we weren't able to do that, but this year, it's already on the advisory calendar, and the 9th and 10th graders in November will receive that instruction. The kids don't know yet. And we talked a little bit about there being tutorials in Avid, and I think it's really important to know the difference between tutoring and tutorials. Tutoring, as we all grew up with, is teacher-led remediation. There's little student ownership. Tutorials is all about the kids in control. They have specific steps using their notes and materials to establish what they know. If you look in the picture on the left, that's our students teaching, and on the right, that's a tutorial. And so on the board, it says, first they have to list what they know, and then eventually they get to their very specific point of confusion. Once they establish that point of confusion in the tutorials, their other team members help them solve that point of confusion, but they don't give them the answer. They guide them by asking questions. And it's great because the tutorial process then promotes student confidence, and that carries over to all their other classes, which is what Ricky Tierney is going to talk about.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Ricky Tierney. I, as Mr. Hughes stated, am a social studies teacher at Wauwatosa East High School, and I also teach the Avid 10 elective. The other courses that I teach are AP Human Geography and AP Psychology, and you can see there's a couple of examples of student work that I've shared there that I will talk about secondly. I would first like to talk about how Avid has impacted me as a teacher. Prior to beginning my work with Avid 3 years ago now. Avid has supported my work mostly in planning for instruction. Before working with Avid, I was really largely focused and limited my thinking to just what am I teaching? And with Avid now, I have noticed a shift in how I think about planning for instruction, and I'm more intentional about how, because Avid has equipped me with those resources to meet my students where their needs are at with a variety of instructional materials. How has Avid impacted my students? You can see in the two pictures here, students, the picture on the left is from AP Psychology, that's focused note-taking, which we're probably all really familiar with right now. Seen a couple examples of it. Both courses are AP Advanced Placement courses, rigorous courses, and to meet students where they're at and to feel confident in their learning, I implement a lot of Avid strategies. And what you can see for student benefit, well, I'm an Avid elective teacher. I'm also consciously bringing Avid strategies to the two other courses that I teach so that all students and all of my classes are benefiting from Avid, not just my elective students.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So thank you to our two high school teams for sharing a little bit about what Avid is currently doing in each of their buildings. And at this time, we want to bring forward a few recommendations. We would like to move forward with reevaluating our rollout plan for our Avid school-wide. We want to continue to have a focus on implementing with fidelity the Avid elective at the secondary level. So continue to focus on that. We want to continue to support our Avid site teams, as you've heard the two high school teams talk about today, and ensure that our principals and those site teams are leading those conversations around enhanced instructional practices, as you've heard tonight during those professional learning opportunities on our early release Wednesdays and other embedded professional learning days throughout the year. We also want to look at modifying our current 3-year contract with Avid to match the implementation stages of the district. And as noted in the executive summary, we are looking to push pause on any more of that current 3-year contract that we had initially approved back in February. And then we would like to bring forward a proposal for the creation of an Avid district director position for the 2022-2023 school year, whose primary role would be to support our current 6 schools that have begun the implementation phase of Avid in those schools, and then be able to support any additional schools that may come forward and say that they would like to move with whose building leaders come forward and say that they would like to examine the opportunity to implement Avid based on their needs assessment that they would be asked to complete. So with that, I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time to hear a little bit more about Avid.
Thank you, Dr. Marble. Mr. President, board members, community members, before you jump into your questions, I just have a few other addendum statements I would just want to make. One is, if you go to the executive summary and dive into it with detail, we really spent a lot of time discussing the implementation stages and realizing that if you're going to reground or reevaluate where we are, it was too ambitious to have the type of plan that we initially put out for the contract that you approved in February of this calendar year. Luckily, Avid Center has not invoiced the district. There has been no transfer of funds between Avid and the Wauwatosa School District. There was actually a conversation between Avid officials in the district last week where we informed them that we do indeed intend to modify the contract. And they were open and ready to listen to how we want to modify it. So I'm pleased that that's going to happen. I think another component of this that should just be discussed for transparency's sake is, I think it's slide 4 of the presentation, where it clearly states that this is not a district initiative, but this is a school-based initiative. So when the principal and teacher leaders on a site team indicate that they want to move forward, that's when we are engaged. In my experience, any initiative of worth, regardless of it's Avid or anything else, this is how you want to engage people. During my transition into the district, I heard a lot about teacher voice. Well, you can't have more teacher voice than having a site team that is full of teachers who are teaching their colleagues how to utilize instructional strategies in an effective way. In the frequently asked question document, it's an acknowledgement that the contract for Avid was signed by a prior district administrator before the Board of Education approved it. It's my recommendation. I know Mr. Phillips is working with our business services right now to look at all of our 6,000 series policies. It will be one of my recommendations to the board that we add some language in policy 6230 that indicates that there will be no signing of a DocuSign contract that has a dollar amount of $20,000 or more. I think that's a firewall, if you will, to prevent the situation that occurred here. I guess the last thing I would just share with you is that as an administrative team, we are agnostic when it comes to platforms or tools that are utilized to advance the increase in academic achievement, creating more opportunity for students, and creating a better sense of belonging. We're not tied to one program, or I will speak for myself, I am not tied to a certain program. And regardless of the program that's being utilized, one thing that's really critical is that we do have goals, that we measure and monitor those goals. And if you really listened closely to the presentations from Tulsa West and Tulsa East, and again, thank you colleagues for your presentation, that ultimately when we are changing universal instruction for students, it's not about the kids changing. It's about the adults changing their professional behavior. So then the students are having a different academic experience. So often, and I think it goes along with what Gloria Lansing-Billings talks about, where she said we shouldn't use the terminology of achievement gap, but an educational debt. If you've ever heard her use that terminology, that when we use the terminology achievement gap, it puts the responsibility and ownership on students because they're the ones with the gap. Where if we utilize the language of there's an educational debt that we collectively owe as the professionals and as community, then you look at the work a lot differently. So I just wanted to kind of wrap that up as well, to just add some addendum statements to the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Means and Dr. Marble and everyone that came tonight to give your thoughts on the presentation. I greatly appreciate it. I know the board appreciates it. And thank you, Dr. Means, to your staff for helping raise some concerns and modifying how we're going to implement it to best suit our students' needs. Any board comment or questions for Dr. Means or Dr. Marble? Ms. Raleigh?
You know I do. So, and if you want to answer these, that's fine, or if the East team wants to answer them. So I'm really interested in slide number 15. I really appreciate, like, I think the question was raised by someone that's in the FAQ about, like, how did you come up with the question around inconsistent instructional practices? That to me is like a given. That's generally what the challenge is in most school systems, right? And so I like these steps. My concern is, and my question is, can you talk about like what the fidelity of assessment is in these? Because it's one thing for a teacher to learn a new instructional strategy. It's another thing for them to practice this. It's another thing for them to self-assess on it. It's a whole nother ballgame for one or two other people to be in the room and assessing and seeing if the teacher's self-assessment actually matches with the data, the evidence, the student engagement. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. Mr. Hughes or Ms. McGinnity, would you want to step into that? Otherwise, I can, from a district perspective, we are in all of our schools, all of our administrators are paired up with a leadership partner. And so we will be doing 3-week three-week visits. So every 3 weeks we're going into schools and doing what we're calling learning walks to help with that calibration piece, so that we are all on the same page. As the way that I define quality instruction is the same way that you define quality instruction. So that's one of the calibration pieces that we'll be utilizing in this aspect of things. And then Mr. Hughes, I don't know if you have anything in addition you want to add.
Sure. One of the things that we did last year with our instructional equity coach, Rachel Delman, was start to do peer-to-peer observations with some goals of just observing one thing that was positive that you observed, and then have a conversation with your staff member about that. We did that in social studies and in science. It was optional, but the goal was to get others into your classroom, to break down that doors closed barrier. I don't want people to see me teach. Heaven forbid they might have criticism for me to improve. So our intent is, again, to have peer-to-peer observation around these things, because we're asking multiple teachers to sign up in one of the 8 choices that are there in this. So there will be teams of people that hopefully have comfort to go in and see you practice this in step 2 or 3, practice what you have learned as well, and get feedback. Have you thought about trying this? So again, I mentioned the power of the peer-to-peer piece being really something that warms my heart, because staff are opening their doors to other staff because they want to improve their instruction.
Mr. Hughes and Dr. Marble, is it also fair to say that if a school is far along in their implementation, that they would be using the coaching and certification instrument as well, which would calibrate and provide a monitoring tool that can be implemented with fidelity to ensure that what's happening on the first floor is happening on the 3rd floor?
Yep.
Yes. When we get to step 3 in our cycles, we are asking staff members to have artifacts and information to add into our CCI so that we can load things into artifacts for that very purpose.
So if I'm understanding correctly, you would be able to have teachers share student work and have other teachers or folks that have gone through the process of being certified as an evaluator looking at that student work to make sure that it's grade level appropriate, to make sure that it's high expectations, et cetera.
I think that would be the end game, the end goal. It may take a little bit to get to that level of analysis you're looking for, but definitely that would be the best outcome for peer-to-peer observation and work for our instructional equity coaches.
Yeah, I mean, I want to comment, I really like the idea of engaging peers at the start, but evaluation and coaching are 2 different things. And I want us to be open to coaching and open to people being in a room. And at the same time, I want to know as a board member, like return on investment, how much growth are teachers making in these strategies? Because they're good strategies. Like I like Avid. But I just want to know that like what we're doing doesn't sort of stop sort of in year 1 and then it's like the shiny nickel and we move on to something else, that we're really staying on it, and that it's not just one person comes into your room 1 or 2 times a year. Like there's like this practice piece that you talk about with the Avid Elective, which I am 100% behind, where kids get that practice, that tutorial. I want to make sure that adults are getting that opportunity to get that feedback.
I think the other power really comes in when, whether it be course course alikes are collaborating with one another too, where they're co-planning together with the how, as Ms. Tierney articulated, really being intentional about how they're going to engage students in the content, and then coming back and having a reflective conversation with those same peers as to how it went, or that's really the cyclical power of engaging with course-alike colleagues on an ongoing basis. And then as we utilize our instructional coaches, our administrators, our site team members to also lean in and be thought partners with those individuals on a regular basis, that's really where the power is in being able to really leverage this to the level that you're looking to have.
I think, again, just brass tacks, when you go to the recommendations slide, one of the reasons why there's a recommendation for the board during the budget process to consider a district director for Avid is because right now Dr. Marble is our director of secondary education. And I've shared with Mrs. Bowers that we have some audacious goals that we want to reach in teaching and learning. So I need her to focus, her being Dr. Marble, on ensuring that we are reintroducing standards-based instruction at the classroom level, that we are regrounding ourselves in a 7-year curriculum cycle, that we're utilizing our professional learning communities and those Wednesdays effectively, that we're addressing our disproportionality data and not just admiring it from afar, but really putting in strategies. When I talked to Dr. Marble, she's shared with me over the last 2 years or so, about 70% of her job has really been trying to implement Avid. And so from that implementation side of things, we cannot afford to have Dr. Marble in that space. And I guess the last thing I would just share is that teachers and principals tend to lean on a person whose job is to help them implement with fidelity. And when you know that I firmly believe that in a teaching and learning organization, you create trust among professionals when there is a level of competence that can be demonstrated, that there's a level of sincerity, that you're going to be there, that you're not overwhelmed, but you're truly sincere about getting there. And then finally, that you're reliable. And right now, Dr. Marble is trying to do a lot of different things and is stretching her and being in those 3 components of being competent in everything that we need her to be competent in, to be sincere in telling a principal or a member of a site team that she'll be there to support them, that's reliable. We're stretching people. So I really appreciate the question around fidelity and monitoring of it, that it's just not another thing, but we're going to do it well. And that's where, it gets into, we have to be agnostic to, it's not about Avid, it's about implementation. So you will see in this presentation that we really leaned on the terminology of implementation versus a product that we've purchased.
Any other board comments or questions?
Thank you. Okay, that's really, there's a lot of things in my head at the moment. So first, let me go to maybe the easier ones on the contract side. What I thought I heard you say was that Avid does not billed us for a contract?
That's accurate.
Okay, so should we pay them for the work, or we don't have to? Is that what we're saying?
I believe, Dr. Marble, if I'm correct, we did post the contract as well. Okay.
We did post.
So for the public sake, the contract that we currently have in place with Avid is posted. There are 3 major components to a contract with Avid. The first is our membership fees, and they charge schools a membership fee every year. And through those membership fees, you get access to their curriculum, the strategies that we discussed earlier. They give you They give you access to how to utilize those strategies. The second component in this contract was seats to their summer professional development program. And we had a number of our staff members, and in fact, I think in the FAQ, we list out who actually attended. And then the third component is just having access to their library. That's the third component of the contract. So I would assume, Sharon, at some point they will bill us because we had staff, a number of staff members, if you look at that FAQ, that did attend Summer Institute, and that's for year one. But I want to be very clear, we need to modify the contract for year 2 and year 3 because we're not going to implement as aggressively as the contract that was presented in December of 2020 and that you approved in February of this calendar year. It's not, we don't have the professional capacity. People have the skill. When I say capacity, I mean just the amount of energy to put into it. But yes, they have not billed us to date, which makes the modification of the contract that much easier to implement.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so that was, I think, the easiest question, and I'm happy Ms. Fraley went before me to ask some of those more strategic teaching and learning, staff development questions. So what I am thinking of is a lot of the dialogue we had around the value that you've seen with students, the value that the educators have seen. That was really powerful messaging for me. And to hear the administrators, Ms. Grice and Mr. Hughes, talking about how they have been helped. So clearly this is a program with different components that is viable and can change the way we're doing some things and help students. So I like that. Where I am having a difficult time is figuring out, and maybe this is something we're going to talk about in strategic planning, but role plays between all of the different components of, and I know you're saying year 2 and year 3 doesn't have to be so aggressive, but really getting the benefits as soon as possible. That's what I'm thinking about. And how do we really do that? And is a district director really for this program really the right pathway if some of the other dots are not connecting and we only have 6 schools? Because my goal here is to reach every single student, and I know that's all of our goals. That's what I'm wrestling with, and how to do that the best way possible, considering where we are now and where we need to be and want to be from what I heard tonight. So that it's more or less a question of how can we use this great resource that we built a runway for, and we seem to have a vendor that really is supportive of us. I like that. I like to hear that, and I hope the Avid team knows that because they seem to want to work with us. So I appreciate that, on a side note, I appreciate that you are addressing the procedural issues and the policy issues so that we can go forward in a better manner. So I guess for strategic planning, I'd like to see us figuring out this recommendation as it fits in with the, a greater learning plan. So
you asked, these are great questions. And let me start by saying I've been listening to this conversation since I started the transition. And I think one of the challenges with this conversation I felt we needed to address, and again, I want to give Dr. Marble a great deal of credit, is that slide 4. And I think slide 4 is really important in the presentation because the narrative and the language that I heard us utilizing with Avid is that it felt like it was, or people were describing it as, it was something from the district being done to schools. And my experience with any initiative is that it can't be done. You can't do anything to schools. It has to grow organically. And so I think it's really important for us to recognize that every school is not mandated to implement Avid. We want principals and their teacher leaders to explore not only this tool, but maybe other tools. If they choose Avid, then that's when we will implement. But a principal may come to either Dr. Marble or Ms. Ebert, who is our director of elementary education, and say, there's something else I think is really interesting that can impact all of our kids. And so we will explore it. I don't want to give one thing I definitely want to deliver tonight in terms of a message is that the district is not mandating Avid for every school. We are, in essence, when you speak about strategic vision and alignment, we just want to make sure that when schools are developing their school improvement plans, that they're utilizing tools that they feel motivated around and that they are engaged in, and that it's something that they've done and researched on their own. In regards to where do we want to be, I think ultimately where we want to be is to have a structure and systems in place that will allow us to monitor with fidelity if we are improving or not, and not being vague around statements of what we want a student to look like, but to be very specific around here are the measurables, here are the metrics that we're moving toward. Here's what our school improvement plans say we're going to do. And I can't remember which of our great teachers said it tonight, but here's how we're going to do it. I think so often we've talked about what we want to be, but this conversation tonight should be around how we're going to do it and then how we're going to measure it. And then the last thing, you raised a great point about the district director. I think there's a tipping point of how many schools you have online with a certain program before you have to say, do they need specific support and help? I want to defer to Dr. Marble and the teaching and learning team and candidly site teams and principals to say, we're now at a point where we need someone who's going to meet our needs whenever I pick up the phone and say, I need something. I guess that's a really organic conversation as well, that what I do know about our principals, they're really strong. People who are on site teams are really insightful, and they're not bashful. They will let us know when we as a district are holding them back from being the very best they can be in the implementation stage. Great questions. Thank you.
Well, just to continue that, but on the concern side of it, I do have real concerns about role clarities and who does what, when. And I heard tonight that teams are only meeting once a month. That doesn't seem like that's a big impact for them, for the investment and what we want to accomplish and what we want to offer for the students. So this is where I'm, how do we interact with professional learning communities? How do we interact between the different elective classes? I mean, we've seen some evidence of that, but again, and how do we keep replicating it? And providing, I think an external resource can be very valuable, but how? Like you said, how is my question still, and how is it coordinated?
Thank you.
Any other board comments or questions? I've got a couple. Go ahead, Dr. Jessamine.
One of the things that I found really helpful is kind of the implementation plan for this, and your articulation of taking a look at what are the key metrics at the end of what does success look like, and I think that's really beneficial and essential. And I know one of the recommendations is that there be a quarterly report on this. And I think it would be helpful to know what are the success metrics at each point in that along end of first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter that we're aiming for, so that we'll know if we've hit them or haven't hit them. and why or why not. I think that will be beneficial. One of my kind of questions as we move forward, and I know we're moving towards a kind of a new 5-year strategic plan. I know that there's work being done on kind of looking at the curriculum and accelerated learning coming out of the pandemic, but how do all these things fit together? And I think that will be helpful as we think about and move forward at the secondary level, middle school, and high school, as well as the elementary level, of any of the initiatives that we have, of where do things shake out and how do they relate to each other and how do they connect to each other. One of the questions I have that I'm hoping someone can answer tonight is how, and I think, and I had the pleasure of being able to actually sit in Ms. Tierney's class and observe some students doing the presentations last year in her Avid course. One of the things I'm interested in is what is the problems that we're seeing solved, and how is Avid doing that versus kind of what were we doing before where we were getting stuck. And I think we touched on that a little bit, but I'm curious to continuing to hear kind of how we're doing that. So how is this intervention systematically addressing some of those different components? That's something I'll be looking for kind of in future and ongoing conversations and presentations and reports.
I guess I would say right now we're still in the infancy phase of really trying to understand the impact. I think that we have the belief of if we are more intentional about the how we are engaging students, we will then see greater student engagement and greater student output as a result. But we're in day 7 of the school year. And so I would just ask for just a little bit more time for us to be able to capitalize on that question.
For sure. Okay. Without a doubt. We're only 7 days in. Feels like it's been months.
8 days maybe?
It's our first 5-day week. All the parents are trying to get through it. One of the last things I would say, and this is to pick up on the point about observed teaching and feedback. I had the pleasure of doing a couple of years of being a scholarship of teaching and learning with as a Carnegie Fellow. And I think it's really absolutely essential. And it's a component of our culture that we have to address, is that teachers seek out and pursue feedback. The one class I'm teaching right now, I have a co-instructor who is really quick to give me feedback and really enjoys doing it. And sometimes I enjoy hearing it and sometimes not, but it's always making me a better teacher. And so I think whatever we can do and whatever supports that we can have in place to encourage that. I know it's not a norm within the culture of education, certainly not in higher ed. My hunch is probably a little bit easier to implement in the K-12 sector. But anything that we can do to support and encourage that, I'd really be on board with.
Thank you. Any other board comments or questions?
Yeah, I'll just make a couple comments. I think it's refreshing to hear us say the term pump the brakes and to hear us not be tone deaf to capacity, and to take a pause and to really, it's refreshing to hear the approach of bottom up versus top down. And so I just want to commend the district for having the guts to do that instead of forging forward, with blinders on. So I just found that refreshing. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for everyone who came tonight. Appreciate it. I think one takeaway for me that I'm hearing tonight, and that I hope we continue to kind of move forward, is how are we going to measure results and what does that look like? So future updates, I'm sure that's what we will hear. So I certainly anticipate that being it, because we certainly want to know that. And I'd also be interested if there are things that are somewhat immeasurable. There's a student learning and a student progressing. Some things can be measured. I'm not sure all things can, but having that conversation I think is important as well. So I appreciate it. Anything further, Dr. Means?
No, sir.
Thank you to everyone who came tonight. Greatly appreciate it. We'll move on to a student enrollment report.
Mr. President, board members, community members. Oh, I think, do you have to?
We'll do community comment for those at the end. That's what
sure. Community members, board members. The third Friday count in September and the second Friday count in January are very important dates for our financial health. It is also an important time for us to monitor our enrollment for staffing's sake, where we may have specific needs that we were not anticipating at the beginning of the school year emerge as a result of where our enrollment sits. I think the last 2 to 3 years have been really difficult to track and to monitor and predict our enrollment. And so I've asked Mr. Porowski to put together a presentation around where we stand with enrollment as of today. And I think that actually the point in time that we picked was September 9th, so last week, Thursday. We acknowledge that next week or this coming Friday will be an important date, but it's not the only date of importance. There's also the date of the second Friday in January. But I think there's some interesting data in here that Mr. Porowski will unpack for us. So, Mike, thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Means, and to the board. It's always tough to go after the Avid presentation with student enrollment, but I think it also gives us a really good opportunity to look at what we're trying to do for all students and some of the trends that we have. So I do appreciate the opportunity this evening. As Dr. Means shared earlier, and this is something I probably didn't realize as an associate principal or as a teacher, just the impact that enrollment has on the district. And I don't take that lightly as far as this being the significance of the task and how it really relates to our financial operations and really touches every aspect of our learning community. So in our task today, really looking at what are some trends that we were able to see, and then as Dr. Means shared, it's not our only snapshot, but it gives it an idea so that when I come back in October and I'm able to talk about this, it won't be the first time that people are seeing some of this overall data in front. As Dr. Means shared earlier with the background, this Friday will be our third Friday count. And then we also have the second Friday of January. Bullet point 2, the pandemic did have an impact on us. Our district overall saw a pretty sharp decrease in the number of students who were enrolled last school year. Our preliminary data says that we're making a slight uptick, but I know when the executive summary and the table that was shared, we are still below where we were prior to the pandemic in 2019 and 2019 and 20. The first slide allows kind of a comprehensive total. So it has our resident count. It also has our non-resident count. Just 2 factors. When it says not yet determined, those are pieces of data that only come after the third Friday count that happen in conjunction with just other districts as well as the DPI. So that's not that we didn't look at it, but just so that you're aware. So for us this year, we saw that we have 5,044 resident students and 1,356 non-resident students, and allowed us then to just kind of break it down in each demographic, including into JK. Just as a comparison, again, looking at resident from 20 and 21 to 21 versus 22, you can see that overall, as of September 9th, we had a decrease of 51 students from the 5,395 to the 5,344. However, we also had an uptick of 56 resident students increase from last year to this year as far as JK enrollment. For non-resident students, similar trend that you'll see that we have a increase of 60 students compared to the from the 21-22 school year to the 20-21 school year. And currently, like Dr. Means said, as of the 9th, we had 1,356 non-resident students
And then that's broken down by 220 as well as part-time open enrollment. This is a really interesting piece of data when we look at some historical trends. And I want to thank Debbie Hoppy, who's our administrative assistant in student services and teaching and learning for pulling this together. Because when we look at it, this is a really critical one where I stopped and paused and said, it's not just a one-year thing. This is a pretty significant data point of saying, on average, we're basically having X amount of students come, but Y are leaving. And so that number each year is between 200 and 300, and that puts us in a significant deficit when we look at overall enrollment within the district. And just seeing again, as I said, that this is not a one-year snapshot, and even shows us that this was happening again prior to the pandemic. This year, I went back and did a comparison again of 2021 to 21 and 22, started from early childhood up to 12th grade. So you're able to see a comparison in the left column of the number of resident students, and in the right column, the number of non-resident students. One data point that I wanted to point out in that, overall, if you look at that, enrollment would be down to date in grades 1, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 11. And as I was preparing for this evening and talking this through with Dr. Means, we saw some significant losses at the middle school level that continue into our early entry into high school. So that's going to have, again, some significant impact on what our enrollment is at the middle and high schools moving forward. There has been a significant gain on a positive level in junior kindergarten this year. Last year we had 283 resident students, 28 non-resident students. This year, again, we've had some significant increases, particularly in resident students, but that does not compensate for our overall loss of students in the different grade levels. By building, I went through and did resident enrollment, and then in the right column, I did the change or the difference, looking at basically, are we up or down, or are we net neutral? And you'll see overall the majority of our schools at the elementary level, and I included Montessori in there, even though they have a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade programming, would be slightly down. Our 3 schools that would be up were Roosevelt, Underwood, and Washington. At the secondary level, for the time being, I clumped the middle school and the high schools. I can make the specific school totals available after we do the third Friday count. There was just the ability to do this, I think, played out nicer by not doing that as we're trying to enroll kids. So for the middle school, just seeing that right now, we have a difference of -70 in the overall enrollment at our middle school levels, but at our high schools, we're up 80 students compared to last year. As far as next steps, student services, in conjunction with our data team and specifically Lisa Winters, will conduct our third Friday enrollment count. One thing that we are really intentionally doing this year is continuing to track and find out our students from the 1920 school year. If they haven't re-enrolled, like why they decided to leave the district. I'm trying to find out more of a reason behind that. And then looking at some of the data trends that I brought forth this evening, starting to examine our space capacity for the 22-23 school year in regards to open enrollment seat recommendations. And again, I just wanted to thank everybody for the time.
That's wrong.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this report. Number one, can we get this report posted to board docs just so we and then the community can all have access to these numbers? That would be awesome. Because there's some new numbers in here that the board didn't see in advance to this presentation. So this is all kind of just for transparency, a little bit new to us, right, as part of this presentation. So a lot to react to. I'm not sure of the slide, but if you can go back a few, it's the one with all the grades.
This one?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
This one I know in particular is always especially of interest to Mr. Meyer, who is loves taking a look at this kind of chart. But the thing that he has emphasized is the way you don't just sort of look at SK versus SK, but it's, you know, SK in 1 year moving to first grade in the next year and seeing the difference between the two sort of, you know, diagonal that way. Because you kind of watch one cohort moving to the next grade over time. So I guess in that case, I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at it in that way to see if there were any surprising, you know, jumps or dips in that kind of diagonal move as opposed to just across. I know that the other thing that we typically see, and I know you had a slide on this where the difference between JK and 12, but that's not really surprising because we typically see a number of students coming into the district, you know, in the first grade, sixth grade, ninth grade are typically like the big entry points where we see enrollment jump. So it's good to see that those are continuing. But just curious to see if you had any other analysis based on that diagonal review.
I think that's something when I come back, we can do a better job of looking at specifically, were there any like trends, like you said, instead of just going linear, you know, that way. So we can definitely.
Because you're kind of looking at apples to bananas, you know, because it's just completely different group of kids.
The other part too is I know on the workbook sheet that we have, one of the things that we tried to do is look at it just school-wide from what did you see last year. So that might allow us to drill that down a little bit better, to just start to look for some trends, whether it was a specific grade or a specific school or whatnot. But that was at least for the start, so I can take note of that.
One of the curiosities I have is that we know in general in the Midwest, our birth rates are lower. So in order for TOSA to buck that trend, we have to have more people moving into TOSA, or there's different things to do. So TOSA has historically been a place that's been really attractive for families to move into. That's challenging with higher home costs. So I think I'm really intrigued to see, similar to what Sean said, is like where do we see gaps over time, and is our younger ages sustainably dropping, so that the number where you had of kind of what it looked like year over year, I'd be curious about how that looked the last 10 years. And do we make up for that in consistent ways now as we did 10 years ago at the sixth grade level, at the high school level? And what things have changed over that period of time?
Any other questions? I would say building on what Dr. Jessup Banger said, and I don't know if this data exists, but I would be interested, if possible, to understand what, as a percentage, how many resident students are we getting, right? If there's 1,000 available, we're getting 800 at any given time. You know, I'm using rough numbers here. You know, is that percentage? Because I think to Dr. Jessup Banger's point, if we have a lower population to draw from, that's an important thing to know. Or if we have a higher one and we're getting a smaller percentage, you know, that would be key. I'm not sure, you know, how much census data is out there to understand that, but for me, it would be interesting to know. I mean, dropping numbers and raising numbers are important, but what percentage of that is of the population would be pretty valuable, I think, to understand. And just help me, I always ask this question, but there's always questions around open enrollment, non-resident. Non-resident, open enrollment, we only take new students in the elementary grades. Is that correct? Any open enrollment students after that are middle school and high school because they entered with us in the elementary school?
That would be correct. Or the only open enrollment at the secondary level is into Wauwatosa Virtual Academy.
Into Wauwatosa, thank you for that distinction. Yes.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Is the Wauwatosa Virtual Academy numbers I was trying to make sense of if they're included, where they're situated. Are they in this data as well, or are they split out entirely separately? In one spot, I know that they're separate, but are they also included in our first Friday count, or is it just a totally separate data point?
I know I do have them in the workbook sheets. I'm trying to see if I can pull it up.
Like I was curious, there's that number, the preliminary number of district enrollment of 7107. Is that inclusive of those students or exclusive?
That would have been, that's inclusive. I apologize. I know in our workbook page that we do have WVA broken down similar to every other school. So JK through 12th grade. So it allows us to look at what was their enrollment similar to every other school, the exact same way from last year to this year.
Okay. I think to Mr. Rollins' point, we'll make this presentation along with that spreadsheet document with all the different tabs available to the public.
Any other board comments or questions concerning enrollment?
I mean, I think I'll just expand. I think there is some good news in the presentation and just a quick look. It looked like every grade at the secondary level was going up, cohort to cohort, watching them move. That's good news. It looked like it was only 8th grade, maybe had a dip of a couple of kids, but 6th and 7th were all up in comparison to last year. JK seeing that number like way up in comparison to last year is awesome to see. I mean, that's our lifeblood, the long-term lifeblood of the school district is to see those JK and SK kids coming back. So there's a lot of good news in this report, and as the district continues to, I'll just leave it there. There is good news.
I think I agree with you. I think one of our deliverables must be to try to retain as many of those 340 junior kindergarten students as possible. So when you do that diagonal and look at next year, we hope to retain as many of those students as possible for SK.
Yeah, and I think when we come back, it'd be interesting to know from a societal trend, what are other districts seeing in the area potentially? If again, maybe I'm asking for numbers that are difficult to come by, but are numbers reflective of other districts? Are we, worse, better, about average? It's always important to understand what they might be doing differently.
I think the preliminary information I'm getting from the area is that students are reemerging. If you remember, there were a lot of articles last school year that said, where did the students go? We weren't able to get in contact with them. A lot of our students have reemerged. They're back in our buildings physically. So I think it's really important that's why it's really important that we are in session and it's 5 days a week. I think one example of us just being back and present is the early childhood numbers. If you look at during our COVID year, there weren't any students who were identified. This year we have 10 that are in early childhood. I think that's a sign of families understanding that we're open and ready to receive their students.
One of the other helpful data points, at least was helpful in my mind, was in past presentations, there was a sense of the percent of students who were coming to Wauwatosa School District as opposed to private school. And the way that we did the math on that one, I don't know if this, whatever. The way that we did the math on this was we got the census number for the total number of students in Wauwatosa, right? And then compare that to the number of students who are in the Wauwatosa School District, and then created a percentage based on that. So I know in the Wayback Machine, it was something like 25% of Wauwatosa City students were in private schools. In recent years, it was something like 11. So we had really come a long way in convincing a lot of people that this was the right choice to make. So I'd be curious to know if we can crunch that number again for this year at some point when it makes sense, we've got all the right data.
It's our plan to come back to you next month with this data once we have received the third Friday count numbers officially and we've crunched them. But I think bringing that what percentage of school-age children who live in Wauwatosa attend the public schools is something that we can definitely bring back.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll go forward with community comment on the church teaching and learning items, either the Avid report or the student enrollment report. We'll start on in the room. Please come forward, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes, and then we will move on to anyone that's online.
Mary Jo Randall, 727 North 59th Street. I'd like to thank the administrators and teachers for their enthusiastic presentations tonight. I've heard many of those over the years, my 12 years on the board, as teachers brought forward new ideas, new initiatives, new ideas for new curriculums, and so on. I think those anecdotal presentations are important and they're valid, but equally or more so important are measures, which is what's missing from Avid. Standards, benchmarks, and measures of success. I don't know what they are. There's nothing in the presentation that said how we will measure success. Now I know that Avid Secondary has been in place for a couple years. There should be some data there. If we know what it is we're measuring, are we measuring how many kids go to college? I'm not sure about that. So the presentation also identified several obstacles causing, as Mr. Phillips said, causing you to put on the brakes or whatever. Those are a result of not following board policy and creating a new curriculum. All of the things I just mentioned would be included, including cost and cost comparisons. So for instance, when the high school principals identified that their teachers were not consistently using strategies, there should have been a question of why, what's missing in those strategies, what other programs are available. Those are requirements in the board policy to get presentations, quotes, to establish benchmarks and standards for success. This is important financially as well as educationally. One example, I'm sorry, I have so many things that I want to ask about, and I know I can't, but April of 2020, the board approved a new ELA curriculum for elementary. The investment is $729,000, including professional development that continues today. In order to get that approval, they had a presentation that included effectiveness measures, outside implementation checks, forward assessment results, student staff surveys, PALS assessments, secondary mastery, common summative assessments. So in making the decision to make that investment, they had all that information. Everything about Avid that we're talking about is after the fact. Again, regarding finances.
Ms. Randall, you are over 3 minutes. If you could maybe take 30 seconds and sort of wrap it up,
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Briefly, how is the district funding Avid? I know that you're saying we haven't paid anything on this current contract, but we have paid previously. And I know Avid makes a strong push for using Title I funds. And at this point, pandemic recovery funds. So I'm wondering how the district has been paying for that.
Thank you. Any other comments from in the room?
I did not realize that Avid uses the recovery funds. I again ask for information on how our district is using these funds. But one question I have is, and didn't hear about is, and I don't know a lot about Avid, how does it work with our kids with disabilities in the district? I would like to hear more information about that. Thank you.
This is Julie Alexander again, and I am also echoing Deb's comment here because I didn't hear anything from any of these people that presented on how people with disabilities were included in what is going on right now. And I also know that when you're dealing with students with disabilities, I mean, I've got a master's degree. It'd be great if Avid would have been around when I was going through school. But it wasn't. And, when you're dealing with people with disabilities, there's also other costs that may need to be included, such as different methods for achieving good note taking and things like that, because students with disabilities sometimes use accommodations and things like that that are part of the school curriculum for people that are in grade school and high school. So, I mean, those are some of the questions that went through my mind as this presentation was being given. And I am hopeful that Wauwatosa is just not looking at our transition students, our students with disabilities, and saying, oh, they should be exempted from this, because they kept on emphasizing all students. So students with disabilities are from all students. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamie, is there anyone online that would like to speak?
There are no hands raised.
All right. Appreciate everyone's comments this evening. We will move on to final public comment on any non-agenda items. Anyone in the room? Please state your name and address. You have 3 minutes.
This is John McClue from 772 North 115th again. First up, I would like to sincerely thank and congratulate Dr. Means, the district, building administrators, Principal Hughes, Principal Grace, for a wonderful welcome back to school celebration that took place. While I cannot speak for all buildings, I was at Council West for their celebration. It was a wonderful event, lots of high energy, just wonderful the way it was conducted and carried out. And so I thank and congratulate you on that event. I hope that, from what I've heard, we've been going to school, that things are going well. Talking to others, from students, talking to other parents, some of the educators and some of the building staff. They say how wonderful it is, having everyone back in class, the energy levels, how things are, feeling much different and much better than they did last year. Unfortunately, I wish I could say everything was coming up roses. There is something that's come to my attention that I don't know if this board is aware of it or not, that needs some immediate action by the board and or the administration. As most of you are aware, there's a critical shortage of bus drivers. Unfortunately, this is not just affecting students' abilities to get to and from school, it's also greatly affecting our student athletes to the point in time where they are going to cancel events because they cannot get buses to go to these events. There should be a solution to be able to get students to where they need to be. I don't know exactly what the solution is, but part of a student experience is not just education. Of course, that is the most important part, but the extracurriculars are also very important to students. And so we should find some sort of solution. Students that are able to drive themselves, maybe they can drive themselves to the events. Maybe parents can shuttle students to events. But there's got to be some way to accommodate the needs of our athletes and others, clubs and such, to get to events that they need to. I know there are liability questions, but there are waivers, and I believe last year that we did give out waivers and allowances to be signed to allow parents to transport students to athletic events and other events. I know that you guys are meeting with your legal team to discuss other things, maybe address it with them, but I would sincerely like maybe to even hold a special meeting to address this issue and come up with some sort of solution, or at least, by the very least, come up with a solution by the next board meeting to address these issues. We cannot go for another year. Our students are so excited to be back in class, but now we're taking other things away because of things that are beyond their control. there are ways that we can do this. Let's solve this problem, please. Thank you.
I want to give a report on the door. After 3 requests for the school board meetings, public meetings to be accessible for people with disabilities, the door worked tonight. And this really isn't a laughing matter at all. It really isn't. Is that public meetings should be accessible to all citizens, and advocates and persons with disabilities should not have to come forward 3 times asking to access the room. So I'd like to also ask if on the agenda, in board docs, when the meetings are posted, can there be, I asked this, I think 2 weeks ago, just tell me if you're not going to do it, okay? So I don't have to come up and say this all the time. But could there be a statement on there saying the accessible entrance is located, you know, wherever that's going to be located, so people know where that is? That would be wonderful. So thank you for making that happen. I also want to ask again if the Bridges program for our transition students, this is a program that I'm not sure why board policy was not followed by administration to bring forward. This was prior to Dr. Means' time here, but I feel that all programs or all courses for students should be brought forward to the school board. And I don't understand. I just don't understand why it never was and it still isn't. The teachers, they had let me know they were writing a grant request for really what are some essential items. It to me wasn't, it was a nominal amount of money. They were going to be asking various nonprofits to apply to get funding. I spoke actually with my father, who's a trustee on a charitable board, and it was a no-brainer for him. Not only did him and his group say they would be providing this funding, they increased it by 2.5 times what was asked by the staff. This is one example why I feel board policy needs to be followed. I don't understand why the administrators did not bring it forward to you, but potentially this would have been discussed, you know, what is needed for these programs. So still waiting to hear about this program.
Jamie, are there any online people that would like to comment on non-agenda items?
There are no hands raised.
May I have a motion to adjourn into executive closed session per Wisconsin statutes 19.85 1C and G to discuss personnel matters with legal counsel?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Newman, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Fraley?
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger?
Yes.
Ms. Mufeld?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. Tillman?
Yes, we are adjourned into closed session. We'll be